If your business feels like a constant mess, and if people keep asking you the same questions, if every week feels like you're firefighting, and if you can't take a day off without things breaking, then I'm going to tell you exactly what's happening. You don't have a team problem. You don't have a motivation problem. You don't have a I need better people problem. You have a process problem. And the fix is simple, but most business owners never really do it. You need to start process mapping. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, okay, process mapping, that sounds corporate, like something, big corporations do. You're wrong, because process mapping is just a fancy way of saying, let's stop guessing how work gets done. So in this video, I'm going to show you what process mapping really is, why it's the fastest way to scale a small business, and how to do it without turning it into a bureaucratic nightmare. Let's go. So here's why small businesses feel chaotic. Work lives in people's heads. That's the problem. It lives in random Slack messages. It lives in, the way Sarah does it, how we've always been doing it, a half-finished Google Doc from 3 years ago, the founder's memory, tribal knowledge, vibes, all this sort of stuff. And all that works at the beginning, right? But eventually you hit a wall, because every time you add more customers, orders, employees, contractors, channels, complexity, every time you add more stuff, you add more ways for things to go wrong. So guess what happens, right? You become the quality control person. You become the problem solver. You become the bottleneck. Now, your business becomes dependent on you, and that's why you cannot delegate properly. And that's why just hiring more people doesn't really help. Because hiring without processes just gives you more people doing things inconsistently and keep asking you what they should be doing, right? Now, process mapping is how you fix that. It's how you turn chaos into clarity. Now, so let's talk about what process mapping actually is, and let's demystify it a little bit, right? A process map is simply a visual story of how work gets done inside your business. That's it. It's very simple. It shows where work begins, what steps happen, what each step does, and what decisions get made, and then where it ends, and then what the handoffs are between different processes. Powerful is because most problems in businesses happen at the handoffs and not necessarily in the work itself, because usually the person who's doing the task repeatedly over and over again, they kind of know what to do, even though the consistency might not be there all the time and you have other problems if you're not creating process maps. But the handoffs are really the critical points. So let's talk about, let's say a simple example is like sales closes the deal and fulfillment doesn't get the right info, or they don't get it on time. Then customer success isn't aware, the customer gets a bad experience, and then the founder gets dragged in, right? Process mapping exposes the breakdowns. It's like an X-ray for your entire business. And then once you see it, then you can start fixing it. So here are the three big benefits that process mapping will give you. And as a small business owner, you need all three of them. Benefit number one is you stop being the bottleneck, because once the process is clear, work no longer depends on your memory. Benefit number two is delegation becomes easy, because instead of saying, hey, can you quickly do this, or assigning tasks in Asana, you can simply say, hey, here's the process, here's the standard, and here's the definition of done, and the team member can now operate independently. And benefit number three is that your business becomes improvable, right? And that's the big one, because if you don't map it, you can't really improve it, because you don't know where the actual bottleneck is. You'll just guess and you throw random tactics at the wall. That's why so many business owners are chasing, new shiny objects and the new tactic on the street and so on. It's because they're just basically throwing spaghetti at the wall. Now, mapping turns improvement into something systematic. It makes operations predictable, because when you have a process map, you can clearly see which steps are the bottleneck, and then you can focus on that one, right? Like you have a consistent workflow that happens every time a task gets done, and then you can improve the outputs based on. Now, let's talk about how a small business should process map without overcomplicating it, because I've seen this go wrong. So people try to build corporate flowcharts with 900 symbols and then nobody uses it. So that's not the point. Here's the small business method. Step one, you will simply start with one workflow. Don't map your entire company. It will be overwhelming. Just pick the workflow that causes the most pain, or that you feel like you want to delegate the most, right? Usually it's going to be one of this. It's either onboarding a customer or a client. It's going to be order fulfillment, or customer support, or content publishing, or hiring and onboarding, or maybe it's lead handoff and sales handoff. Maybe it's inventory, purchasing, marketing, whatever it is, right? Choose the one that causes the most chaos right now, because that's where you get the biggest leverage. Step number two, you're going to define the boundaries. So where does it start and where does it end? For example, order fulfillment starts when payment is captured, right? And then it ends when the customer receives the product and support ticket volume is stable. Or let me give you another example. Client onboarding starts when they sign the contract, and it ends when the client has completed onboarding and the first deliverable is shipped, right? You need clear boundaries or your processes just become infinite. So you don't want to have like one process for the entire company that just like connects and it's not clear where one process begins and another one ends, that sort of stuff, right? Because you want individual team members to own one clear process. And then step number 3, you're going to map the real version as it currently exists in your business. And that's critical, right? You don't want to map what you wish happened or a perfect variation. You want to map what actually happens today, because the goal is not to create, a fantasy, an ideal. The goal is to expose reality, and then you can start improving it. So you want to ask the team, okay, what happens first? And then you ask them, okay, and then what? And then what? And so on, right? So you just go step by step by step, and you don't let people skip steps, because skip steps are where the mess is hiding, right? And then when you're happy with it, okay, you come to the end of it, like now you got all the steps from the beginning to the end. Then step number 4, you're going to highlight the pain points. Once it's mapped, you're going to mark the parts where things get stuck, mistakes happen, customers complain, the founder gets pulled in, handoffs break, delays occur. Whenever there's a problem at the step, you're going to mark those steps, because these are your bottlenecks. Then step number 5, you're going to add ownership and a definition of what done looks like. This is where most process maps fail, right? A process map without ownership is just a drawing. It's just a flowchart. Every step needs an owner, it needs standard, and it needs definition of done. Because if a step doesn't have an owner, it will just rot. Like nobody's going to feel responsible for it. And then you're going to get the blame and the finger pointing and that sort of stuff. It's just not going to work as well, right? Step number 6, you're going to turn it into a checklist and an SOP. So your final output isn't just the map, it's going to be the blueprint, which also includes a checklist, an SOP for each step, a training document, templates when needed, and that sort of stuff. So the process becomes executable, right? You have the process map is the high level picture of what happens. Then you break it down into steps, and then those steps will need individual SOPs and checklists and templates, depending on, which process you're mapping and depending on what templates exist and that sort of stuff. And then you're going to assign owners to the entire process and sometimes to individual steps. And this is how process mapping for a small business looks like. Now, here are a few things that you don't want to do, right? So let me save you from the common traps. Trap number 1 is that you try to map everything and you'll never finish, you'll burn out, and your team won't be using it because it will be just too much, right? So you want to start with one workflow, like I said already before. Trap number 2 is you are making it too complex, right? Because the goal isn't pretty charts, it's clarity. So you want to keep it simple. You can always make it more complex as, your business becomes more operated on processes and your team gets used to it and you become better at this. Then you can add complexity. You want to start very simple so that it becomes useful immediately. And trap number 3, you are mapping without implementation, because a map is useless if a team doesn't adopt it, right? So you must train people on it, you must enforce it, and you must iterate weekly, and you must get reports weekly by your team members that they're actually implementing this process map and they're giving you feedback on it and that sort of stuff. So it has to become like an actual thing. You don't want to do it like once and then kind of like, abandon it inside your Google Drive. Then, what's the point, right? You want to have a mindset that a process mapping isn't just a one-time project. It's part of how you operate and run the business. So there you have it. Process mapping is the most underrated skill in most small businesses, because it's how you turn chaos into clarity, delegation into reality, founder dependency, that's a big one. You turn founder dependency into a system, and you turn growth into predictable and sustainable engine. If you can't map it, you can't scale it. And if you don't scale it, if you can't map it, you can't scale it. And if you don't scale it, you'll stay trapped in it. So start with one workflow, you map it, you assign ownership, you create SOPs and checklists for each of the steps, and see how fast your business becomes easier.